Hello, welcome to Story Circles. I'm Carolyn in the Caribbean, and I'm delighted to have you join me for this new story about the origin of the Carib people. Thousands of years ago, in the time when all things were possible, the first Carib watched the earth from a cold, dry, distant land. Each day, Longho would put glass lenses to his eyes and gaze beyond the clouds and beyond the sky at the luminous blue sphere. Years passed, and as Longho's family grew, so did a tradition of peering out into their sky at Earth. Together, they pondered its mysteries. The time came when shifting belts of brown-red particles hid its beauty. What was that dust? Did Earth need to be cleaned? Longho set his heart on what he knew would be the greatest adventure of his life. He would lead a group to Earth. One day, they climbed to the top of their highest mountain. They stepped into an extraordinarily thick cloud and directed themselves to Earth. The journey was swift. They were shaken and fevered, frightened by roaring thunder, and sometimes even blinded by stardust. In wreaths of mist and fog, they landed on a massive mountain top. It may have been somewhere in the Guyana highlands, or even Mount Tucuche. Today, we no longer know, but this is what I imagine. Longho and his group cast curious eyes over this strange forest in the clouds. The cool air was damp and hazy. Hundreds of birds chattered and sang. Squawks and whistles of parrots and hawks in flight punctuated their constant melody. As the travellers inspected the thick, wind-swept trees of the mountain top, Longho's son, a strapping young man, stood next to him. "This is too different to our own home," said the son. "There is nothing here to protect us, nothing, nowhere to live, and nothing to eat." "Don't be afraid," Longho replied. "I've never smelt air as sweet as this." "Father, the clouds are lifting," the young man cried out. "Come on, we need to leave now." But even as he spoke, rays of sunlight pierced through the mist and scattered its fragments into thin air. "Look down the slopes of these mountains," said his father. "Look at the vastness of the savannas. Have you seen anything like this on our planet? And over there, look at the sea. The water shimmers like blue-green crystals." "This earth is beautiful," his son admitted, "but it is too wild and free." "The clouds will come back," said Longho. He looked around at their companions. "Can you hear the sound of water?" After a quick search, they encountered a spring. It gurgled and splashed downwards through glistening silver-grey rocks. A small lizard with luminous white spots on its back darted among the stones. As they sat on the bank drinking the clear water, Longho's son said, "Isn't anyone hungry? What are we going to eat?" One woman said, "This ground provides the lizards with food." The explorers came up with a plan. While some built a fire, others cleared away the top layer of the soil. They found an ash-grey clay which they mixed with water to form biscuits. The scent of these biscuits was hardly appetizing. Nevertheless, they sat around the fire and had their unusual meal. Dusk set in. They plucked broad leaves from odd plants that grew on the branches of a tree, and jumped back in astonishment when a tiny golden frog leapt up at them from its centre. Those leaves became beds that they set up near the spring that night. Longho lay gazing up at the brush of treetops against the speckled and glittering dark blue sky. He saw that the moon was waxing. Patterns appeared as his eyes searched the stars. Why hadn't he brought his special glass lenses? Where was his own planet? He spotted the lines of Scorpio, Caribisi, which he had learnt about from his own father. His heart expanded as he pondered being part of a universe so vast and beautiful. Behind his awe, a shadowy thought lurked. They had no way of knowing the way home. Dawn approached. Strident squawks soared above the eager twittering of small thrushes and tanagers. Sunshine beamed down through the lifting mist. The travellers rose to the spreading golden yellow of a clear day. Longho stretched his arms wide and smiled so that his eyes crinkled in exhilaration. "For breakfast," he announced, "let's see what the birds eat." His calm strength made his companions trust him. They feasted on dark red berries and young blooms of wild orchids, some purple, others white or speckled brown, and they swallowed palm cups of spring water. Then the travellers snapped off branches from trees and made sticks, and walked through the undergrowth that sprang from the moss-covered forest floor. They cut through thick vines, cleared the bush, and created a path down the mountainside. They began to notice a change in the landscape. A canopy of trees now towered over the luxuriant forest. Long, flattish creatures slithered and darted through the bush. Sometimes there were strange shapes, agoutis, manicous, iguanas, and other animals, aware of these new creatures crossing their land, followed at a distance in curiosity. When the sun was high in the sky, the group stopped at a rushing stream. The ground had become almost level, and the trees had begun to thin. A colourful bird sat above a branch, weighed down by round brown fruit. The bird dipped its spiky crest toward the cluster and called sharply. The travellers found the softening fruit and split them open to find a pulp as delightful as honey. This was their meal, good but sparse. When they had drunk their fill of water and rested for a while, they prepared to move on. "Let us not wander any further," Longho's son said. "We should return to the spot where we landed. We must be ready to leave when we can." The elder man had been avoiding talk of their return. He said, "How can we tell the way?" "But where are your lenses?" His son grew livid as the truth dawned on him. "Father, how could you do this? Everything I have ever wanted, everything I possess, is now lost." The young man's face turned cold and his eyes blazed. "You have wrecked our lives with this careless act." "I am sorry," said Longho, "but look around you. This is paradise. This is what we lost 10,000 years ago." "I don't care. This is not my home," he said, and his fists curled into tight, hard balls. "Let us go back up to the summit and take our chances." "That's impossible." "I will return the way we came. declared the sun. "You will die," said Longho. The young man gestured at the sky. "We belong out there." The woman intervened. Her gentle voice was persuasive. "Your father is right. Let us stay together. We will make a good life here." She shrugged off her thick coat. "I'll get rid of this now," she said. Heavy at heart, the sun said, "Then, when I die, may I return to the stars?" "May that be possible for us all, my son," said Longho. They removed the long woolen coats with which they had travelled and draped them on low boughs. Some replaced their sticks with new ones. They became more and more aware of the colourful bird which had spread its cape-like wings and flapped to another tree. The bird perched above a cluster of ripe fruit, its long tail feathers at rest, and it stared at them intently. Suddenly understanding, Longho ripped away the light lining of his coat and made a sack to carry fruits, and the others, seeing this, did the same. Thus the bird befriended the humans. He fluttered on before them, alighting on laden trees that bore succulent fruit, and leading them from the tangle of the forest floor to the wide open savannas. One grey evening, the bird flew to the very top of the tallest tree the travellers had ever seen. This was the Ite palm. It rose more than 100 feet into the air, and it stood in a crowd of similar palm trees, almost as high as the bird's perch. Indeed, these palms inhabited the savannah, and the explorers paused and stared. Longho looked up at the Ite just a stone's throw from them, and marvelled. Its wide crown of fan-shaped leafy branches topped a yellow flare of flowering stems with pendulous deep red fruit. Above it all grey clouds thickened. "It's a whole colony. Look up there, those nests swinging," said the woman. "They must be 20 feet long." "We have merely followed the bird to its home," exclaimed the young man. "What shall we do here?" Exasperation and fatigue shook his words. The closer they got to the Ite trees, the swampier the land became. Night would soon fall, and the heat was intense. Everyone, even Longho, sighed. The group retreated to drier ground and sat in a circle. An agouti clamped an Ite fruit between its jaws, scuttled past them, and disappeared under the cover of dry fallen palm branches. Seeing this, they reached for the fruit scattered amongst the long roots of the palms and tried to satisfy their hunger. Sudden lightning zipped through the evening sky. Wide flashes followed, and heavy rumbling began. "What noise is this?" they asked. Then tumultuous rain bit down on the weary travellers. The sun burst out. "How can we live here, father, whipped and punished by the sky?" Longho drew himself upright, his face set in rigid lines. "My son," he said, "when the sky says, 'I will strike you down,' you look him in the face and you tell him no." His son hung his head in silence. His chest swelled with the weight of his father's words. Then, in the relentless rain, he got up and seized a palm branch. It was so huge that he strained to pull at it. He tore at the browning blades of the leaflets. Then he reached into his pocket and got out a square of flint plucked from the forest floor. With this, he cut away the fibrous spines of the leaflets and held them up. "We could tie these branches together," he said, finally facing his companions. "There must be a way to make a shelter for ourselves." "You are right," Longho said. He examined the structure of the giant frond. The sun had begun to glint through the clearing clouds, and now, from low in the western sky, it illuminated the entire group. They built a shelter there that evening and lit a fire over which they toasted the fruit of the ite and the insects that lived in its crevices. They found the palm heart nourishing and satisfying, and the sap of the tree sweet and strengthening. Later that night, they sat staring up at the stars. Caribisi shone clear and bright in the sky. Then they lay under their shelter, the first jupa, and they slept. And this is how I imagine the Caribs came to inhabit the Caribbean and the northern parts of South America. Longho and his group created a home for themselves in a wondrously new world. They came in the time when all things were possible, for the adventure of the journey and the magnificence of Earth.